How's it going, everyone? My name is A.B. Timothy. I am the host of the semi-weekly, kind of whenever I can feel like it on a Saturday at this point, show called Keeping the Beacon Lit. This is a show all about, as the name would imply, keeping your creative beacon lit. I am the host. I am an independently published author. My debut, um, The Shards of Arthur's Shield, which I get that in focus there, is releasing on May 22nd. Kindle pre-orders are available now on Amazon. Link below. And as an independent creative, sometimes it's difficult because I don't have the resources and the support networks that maybe more traditionally published authors would have. So I've come to myself and I've realized that this show is a way that I can be that support for somebody else. Someone can find this show and watch it and be inspired to keep creating their beautiful creations as they see fit. And I'm happy to be a part of that inspiration. Along the way, I've brought on several of my friends, and I do believe that I've had both of these friends on the show before, and they're quite good authors. I must conclude. I don't believe I have either of their books within arm reach. I apologize, but perhaps next time. So today's episode we'll be discussing humor in storytelling. Haha, funny, and I'm very excited to do that with my friends Noah, Ray, and my other friend Matthew, who over there. Cool. And they will be introducing themselves now. Matthew, go ahead and introduce yourself, then we'll get to Noah.
Sure, Matthew Linton. I published my first debut novel, Revo, Blade of the Shooting Star, back in November. I've got the second novel, Franco, Blade of the Shattered Star, coming out in a little over a month, June 3rd. And yeah, that's what I got so far. There's those two, and excited that they're going to be out there in the world. And yeah, I just started writing about a year and a half ago, as far as seriously writing, and it kind of just took off there.
Yep, I'm kind of in that same boat. I'm actually getting on about a year of seriously writing again. I've had bouts of serious writing off and on again throughout the years, but this one started about a year ago at this point. So very cool. And Noah, go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself. I know I would have sent you a script, Noah, but I understand you're a bit hard of reading, so I didn't think to do that. So go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, I can't read, so
Mm-hmm.
that's the first thing y'all should know about me. So if you see any typos in my writing, that's why.
Naturally.
I have to dictate it to my dog, and he types it. So, yeah, my name's Noah. I got a website where I publish a serial. Usually it's pretty regular. The last month or two have been a bit rough on the updates, but usually I try to post a new chapter there every week or two. And then it's called Quietly Calls the Reaper, Western noir with kind of a magical setting. Otherwise, I'm hanging out on X all the time. My username is Noah Ray Writes, so anyone can hit me up there. But I've been writing. I mean, this serial has been going on for probably about a year as well. But I've been in the writing, close or in the writing industry for a long time,
Mm-hmm.
coming from a family with some writers in it. So
Yeah, I'm. My family doesn't have any writers, but I've been writing for about 12 years, and I was first published about, I want to say 5 years ago in an anthology. So I've been at this writing game semi seriously for a little bit. That's cool. So, awesome. Yeah, these are my guests. They're cool people, and they're here to help keep the beacon lit, as it were. And again, as I said, today's episode is all about humor in storytelling and what that means. So, I'd like to open the show by defining terms. Uh, Typically, we understand humor to be sort of, as I said earlier, ha ha funny, which is part of it. But humor is also a tool used to relieve tension. And sometimes when someone is internally bleeding out and it could kill them, you have to relieve tension in order to save them. So if your book is getting bloated and kind of is building up enough pressure on the inside that it could hurt itself, you could potentially relieve some of that pressure by adding in some humor. If it's taking itself way too seriously, for example, if it's getting a bit pretentious, which we'll get into that in a second, but if it's getting a bit pretentious, we can insert some humor. There's several occasions where humor is unintended, but is there. That can be through something as simple as a typo, or it can be perhaps a euphemism that we have today that was written into a text that was written 50 years ago that the author had no idea was going to be there. A friend of mine recently watched the movie Terminal, which is about a man in America who is stuck in the flight terminal of an airport because the country where his passport is from doesn't either stopped existing or there's a war going on or something. And so he's stuck in the terminal for almost a year. And which terminal is he stuck in? Well, it just so happens that he's stuck in Terminal 67. Now, this movie was written 20, I don't know, it's an older movie, so it's written several years ago, if not more than a decade. And so they had no idea of this 6-7 meme coming along. And so now we today look at that and say, oh, that's hilarious. He's stuck in Terminal 6-7. At least some of us Gen Zers and Gen Alphas do. But there was no intention behind that. And so that's the kind of two places that humor can come from, is intention of the author and unintended consequences of time passing. However, I'd like to get your guys' thoughts. How would you guys define humor in your writing? So, like, if you find yourself writing humorous things on purpose, is that usually to relieve tension, or is that usually just because you thought of something funny in the moment? Go ahead and talk on that a little bit. Start with Noah this time.
Okay. So on my current work, I mostly use humor as a humanizing element. There's a lot of like action, violence, and such. So I I don't want people to get bored with the characterization,
Hmm.
even as the action's going on. So I try to insert a little bit of humor, so this guy isn't just going through and being James Bond and flawlessly executing. I try to put a little bit of what you'd call like slapstick. Oh, he tripped and he's gonna make it through, right? It's not a serious threat, but giving that little bit of humanization gives uh, kind of keeps things interesting. So that's the main way you'll see humor in the current work I'm doing is I'm doing it to help make sure that people seem real, that they seem human, because it's when you have a very serious character and they have to deal with flaws, it's often kind of funny when it's superimposed over each other. When I was a kid, I wasn't old enough to go to this writing conference thing, but my brother did go, and he came back and he had all his notes and all the flyers and stuff, and so I was picking through them, and one of them was this book that was signed by a published author who wrote children's picture books, and they were mainly comedy picture books, but he just wrote, remember, humor is surprise without threat or promise. So I kind of that's I know that's not a perfect definition by any means. There's a lot of types of humor that don't really fall under that, but that's kind of a bit of my guiding star as far as putting in a little bit of humor. I just need something that's a little surprising, that doesn't cause threat, and isn't a promise, and generally that gives us a refreshing bit of entertainment and a bit of depth.
I think that's honestly a pretty solid uh, definition. Oftentimes, humor will come from the unexpected nature of a certain take on things, or even just like how much you're downplaying something. I think um, so. I heard it from Norm Macdonald, who was talking about another comedian that he met, uh, and Norm Macdonald said this other comedian was telling him that humor comes in, or at least stand-up comedy comes in two variations, and that is one, taking a really big thing and making it really small, or taking a really small thing and making it really big, which I think can kind of come into play with what you're talking about, where we don't expect the small things to be really big, so it's surprising, and we don't expect the really big things to be downplayed, and so it's surprising. Um, the example he used was, and this is an older example now, but at the time it was more relevant. His the he used oh man Seinfeld. He used Seinfeld as an example of the taking a big thing, oh no, taking a small thing and making it big. Like cornflakes. What's the deal with that? And like making a whole bit about something kind of irrelevant. And then somebody else, I can't remember the example, but taking the big thing and making it small was like Osama bin Laden. What's up with that guy? Like like you're kind of like downplaying it. Like it doesn't really matter. Like who even is that? Like everyone's supposed to know who this guy is. He's a major political figure in world history now, but at the time it was more current events. And so the fact that this comedian's kind of taking it and making light of it is humorous. And I think as writers, we can do that. Um, it's especially something you can do at sort of the middling books in a series, I think, pretty well. If you're writing like perhaps a 5 book long series, after book 2 or book 3, when the audience is well ingratiated into the story and into the world, and maybe even has some insider context, as the author you can start writing jokes that are unique to your world and your world's context for your characters, that the readers will love because it rewards the reader for paying attention and keeping along with the story, and keeping up to date and comprehending what's going on. So there's different ways of approaching it. I'd like to hear from Matt, when you approach comedy in your books, when you do, if you do, how do you tend to approach it? Do you use that surprise factor, or is it more traditional or a different style?
So in my writing, it oftentimes comes across more in like little witty one-liners
Hmm.
or things like that, or playing characters playing off of each other. Somebody can't remember who it was. It's somebody on X. It was a while ago, but they had said, and I know a lot of people don't like it when writers come up with these rules that make, but this one I thought was a good one, where they basically said, always make sure you have at least one character that has no filter, just always speaks their mind, always kind of speaks off the cuff, and I think it's a really good idea. I have that in Revo. There's a character like that, and she was one of my favorites, and yeah, she's funny too. Because when
Hmm.
anytime somebody's like that, they're bound to be one of the funnier people out there. Um, and that's also that particular character I'm thinking of had a very tragic backstory. It kind of goes back to that old saying about how comedy and tragedy go hand in hand. And I think I think that's kind of was my approach to that. Like I said, a lot of mine were just little one-liners that would slip in there here and there that kind of just to kind of lighten the mood a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, as you know from watching my ex, I don't take myself very seriously. Um, and I like characters that can do that too sometimes. They don't take themselves too seriously. Like you said, there's a lot of times it can go to the point of just being kind of pretentious um, when you're like that. And I do think, Noah was talking about how it kind of humanizes people because you even think about that. Like Robin Williams had said something about along the lines of a lot of times people who like to make others laugh, they do it because they know what it's like to feel completely useless.
Hmm.
Um, and my not to claim that my life has been especially tragic or anything like that, but that is you look at a lot of comedians, Jim Carrey, for example, uh, they had just very traumatic upbringings, very traumatic lives, and I think humor maybe was something that saved that because there was so perhaps so little joy in their lives that they just kind of had to create something that would bring them that joy, and that came in the form of humor.
Yeah,
Right.
that
That's
I just to agree with you on that. A lot of comedians. I used to listen to the show where a comedian would actually interview other comedians, and they joke around, and then usually about halfway through the show, he just kind of dropped a line. So what messed you up? Because
Yeah.
people who are good at humor are often, even if it doesn't seem in comparison deep, like a deep trauma or anything, they're very comfortable with their pain and the pain of their past, and they're kind of able to sit in it, and that's where a lot of their comedy comes from.
Yeah, and I think honestly, a part of it might be just because that, I don't want to say masking it with humor, but using humor as a way to talk about it gave them an ability to talk about it. Rather than just burying it, they would talk about it, I guess, with humor, and then maybe it's sort of a type of therapy almost.
Yeah,
Therapeutic.
that's where
Yeah.
the phrase gallows humor
Yeah,
comes from.
Oh yeah.
yeah.
The I think the definition of humor that I've heard, which goes along with what you're saying, Matt, is humor is tragedy plus time. So anything at a long enough interval, removed from its origin in a long enough timeline, can be funny. Uh, Part of why my generation, that being Gen Z, finds 9/11 jokes particularly humorous. At least a great deal of us do. I imagine there's some stick in the muds who are still annoyed about it. But the reason we find it funny is because it happened basically when we were coming onto the scene, like when we were being born. And so as we were growing up, that's all we heard anybody talk about for a long time was this, like 9/11 this, 9/11 that. And we learned the tragedy and we learned to be upset about it. And then people came along finally and started making jokes about it. Obviously, there were people making jokes about it right when it happened because people are horrible. But out over a long enough timeline, things like that start to gain, or rather gather, some humor in their you know in their usage in the nomenclature. It was a horrible tragedy, but now we make light of it because it was so long ago and we don't think about it as deeply anymore, which itself can be its own kind of tragedy in a way. And I think on a more personal level, as opposed to the sort of large scale geopolitical thing, which I've been stuck on apparently today for some reason, um, the on a more personal level, like we have characters in works like The Wheel of Time, such as Matt from Cawthon is his full name, who is kind of a class clown sort of archetype. He makes light of situations. He laughs at things that shouldn't be laughed at necessarily all the time, and he's a comic relief character in several ways. But that's because he grew up, or at least the implication is he grew up in a really big family. And so he had a hard time gathering attention and getting attention growing up. And so one of the ways he found to get attention was to be a troublemaker slash, impromptu comedian. And that gained him the attention he desired. Even if it wasn't always positive attention, he still got the attention. And I think, to point out something else you talked about, Matt, the character who's always blunt and speaks their mind can be a really useful audience insert. Essentially, sometimes, and I find this happening with myself oftentimes, uh, I'll ask myself the question like, well, why isn't X, Y, or Z happening? And then somebody on the page will ask, well, why isn't X, Y, or Z happening? And it's cathartic because I'm like, I just asked that question and now it's being addressed in the book. That's cool. And this just happened in a book that I'm reading, called Quest System Earth Initiated, where a character was introducing someone to what could change their life forever, and they're a teenager. And I won't spoil what happens and like what exactly I'm talking about, but their parents are never once consulted, which to me I found very strange. And then finally, at some point, like 10 pages into this conversation happening, and after they've already done the thing, someone's like, I wonder what our mom and dad is going to think. And I'm just like, me too. Like an hour ago. And so that was funny, even though it probably wasn't meant to be funny. It was funny because I was kind of surprised they even bothered asking it 10 pages later. So that's cool. So that kind of defines comedy and humor going forward. I wanted to ask, like, for example, Noah in your serial or Matt in your series, are there points at which like characters have those inside jokes where like you don't really understand it unless you've been following along and paying attention? And we'll start with Matt this time.
As far as inside, sorry, I'm having to turn the lights on again, which is by me opening and closing my door.
You're fine.
Speaking of, yeah. um,
It's a high tech
no,
studio, not a car.
yeah, that's what it is. Yeah. Um, as far as inside jokes go, um, there's a little bit of humor on the because it's the story is basically you can kind of wish upon a star because it has that kind of that fairy tale vibe to it. And one one common thing that some characters do, especially that one I mentioned before, who kind of always spoke off the cuff, is she'll basically I guess you would call it blasphemy, and take the equivalent of taking the Lord's name in vain, where they'll say something like "stars be damned" or "damn the stars" or something like that. And I guess I kind of chuckled when I was writing that because it's like you said to somebody now like talking about, but in that world it makes sense. It's basically the equivalent of taking the Lord's name in vain or something like that. Which I'll
Mm-hmm.
point out, Revo is kind of very much a clean cut character, and he never says that. He actually never says that phrase. It's always the one who kind of more speaks off the cuff, and another kind of gritty character in the book who says that. Those are the mostly ones that do that. But yeah, Revo himself never says that. A lot of his humor is more unintentional because he is kind of considered, I guess you could kind of call him maybe a lovable dope, or he's kind of oblivious, and so a lot of the humor bounces off of him in that regard. Uh, and yeah, that's kind of the core of it is just those kind of the one-liners there here and there, kind of replacing profanity with things like "stars be damned" or things like that would sound much more harsh to somebody in that world,
Right.
or perhaps funny to somebody in that world. And that's I would hope somebody would see a little bit of humor in that.
Mm-hmm.
You remind me of two other writers. One is Jim Butcher
Hmm.
in his flagship series, which is not in my brain right now for some
The
reason.
Dresden Files.
Dresden. Yep. Uh, Dresden has particular swear words that nobody else uses, and it's almost like a calling card of his. And it actually turns very serious later on when you learn what those swear words mean. But like as it's coming up, it's just kind of like, oh, it's a kind of a silly, wacky thing he does. Uh, and then you also reminded me of Cornelia Funke. I don't know if I pronounced that right. It might just be Funk. Uh, she wrote the Inkheart series. She also wrote Guardians of Ga'Hoole, and she has a huge swearing problem. Like in her regular book, she swears on every page basically, but in Guardians of Ga'Hoole, because it's a kid book, she replaced everything with special bird swear words.
Mm-hmm.
And I think so. I think that's a very valid way to have a little bit of humor in a younger kids book where you can't use the real stuff, but like there's some real fun in having kind of that inside joke.
Yeah. And obligatory second wheel of time reference for the show. Uh, uh Jordan does the same thing. Several times I mean, it's throughout the entire series. It's not just in the first couple books or anything, but like one of the really constant ones is blood and bloody ashes. You'll hear characters say that kind of thing all the time. And at one point, I think it is Matt who kind of like under his breath says bloody ashes, and the village wisdom calls him on it and says, Matt, language, and it's this kind of funny beat. They also have a few variations like light burn you is one because that's instead of I think that one's probably again like taking the Lord's name in vain, so I won't say what I think it is, but like it's that kind of idea of, and it also answers a cool question. Like for example, I feel like it can be kind of anachronistic if in a fantasy book whose society doesn't worship the Abrahamic God to use that Lord's name in vain, because like who do they care? Like God. You know, like in Percy Jackson, they use gods as sort of a stand-in from like it's very rare because that one's a much more clear cut and you know what they're getting at. But they do use the term gods like lowercase g because they're in like Greek inspired world, Greek myth inspired world. So there's ways of getting around it, kind of putting on a filter for your characters, and also it helps you realize that, oh hey, this is a fantasy realm. That's kind of cool because expletives like expulsions of anger or frustration or pain are very human, and so it can be humanizing, but it can also be enticing because they don't use the same ones you do, and now you have to ask, okay, well, why is that? Like, what, like, how is their world different than mine? And you can draw the reader in some more. That's really cool. So, same question to you, Noah. So, in your serial, are there sort of these inside jokes that happen later on in the serial that you only understand or completely get or be involved in or be like in the know of if you've read the previous work?
So, I mean, I try to keep the everything understandable, but there's certainly humorous things that are only humorous if you understand who the characters are.
Mm-hmm.
So, like for instance, there's a dynamic between the main character and his best friend. His best friend is kind of this cultural stranger who doesn't really he takes things slow. He's never really alarmed. He tends to mess up things, but then he doesn't pay the consequence for them because he just kind of keeps moving forward. And it kind of bugs the other character all the time where he's like, I just don't understand this guy. He's from a completely different culture outside of us, and but I love him. And so there's kind of that interplay where he's just constantly frustrating him. And so you might see like in later chapters that happening, and it would probably be slightly less entertaining if it was like a first interaction if you just dropped in late in the serial. But I think you'd grow accustomed to it, understanding kind of the dynamic of their relationship. I don't really have any like super deep inside jokes. I do establish early on because a lot of my inspiration is pulp and actiony stuff, especially Western inspired things. So almost as a bit of an homage to Indiana Jones, my character has a mild phobia to undead things. So ghosts, graveyards, anything like that. He kind of has like a bit of doesn't handle them very well, similar to Indiana Jones and snakes. And so there might be moments in throughout the series where that comes up and he reacts, and I'm not going to re-explain that he has a problem with these things every single time. So it might be kind of weird, might not get it if you don't already understand that about the character.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that can also be relatable in instances like, I mean, undead things aren't the most fun things to deal with. Uh, and the Indiana Jones example is great. I think it's a great example of it because uh, a fear of snakes is very relatable and very understandable for the average person. And so it was kind of funny and exciting and kind of strange that this great heroic figure would also have a fear of snakes. Although, I don't know. I feel like Indy's reaction in Raiders is pretty valid because if anybody came across an ancient sealed room that was probably older than your 10 times great grandfather, and then they cracked it open and they found just literally a living floor, essentially, of snakes, I would also be horrified. And I'm not all that particularly afraid of snakes, but still, I mean, it's a lot of snakes, man. So it was humanizing, and yeah, that's really cool. Okay, so now we're gonna get into it a little bit here. So recently on X, there has been a controversy ignited again because this is a cycle. As they say, the wheel of time turns and ages come and pass, and legends fade to myth, and myth fade, or no, sorry, stories fade to myth, myth fades to legend, and even legend is forgotten when the time that gave it birth comes again. And so I have to, because I guess I wasn't around the last time pretension versus pure joy was brought up as an argument on X, and so there's been this argument going on between one camp, which is authors should take themselves way more seriously, and the art should be a much more serious endeavor, and the other side, which is just like, haha, this story is fun and exciting, I'm just gonna put it out because I think it's cool. And obviously, like a lot of things, I think it's a false dichotomy. I don't think you should only take yourself seriously if you think the story is boring, and I don't think if you think the story is exciting that you can't also take it seriously. But in the context of humor, do you think those authors, and this is kind of an open floor discussion that I'll just kind of let either of you answer, um, or both of you if you both want to chime in here, uh, do you think that those authors who take themselves more seriously have a more difficult time, or perhaps even you could argue for an easier time, writing humor in their work, because humor is ultimately usually self what's the term, self detrimentory, but that's not the word, but you know what I mean, like it's bringing
Self
yourself down.
Deprecating.
deprecating.
Yeah,
Yeah, deprecating.
self-deprecating. Thank you. It's bringing yourself down. So, could those pretentious authors, do you think, successfully endeavor to write humorous or humorful or humorous things?
I would have a hard time believing that. I don't see how you can take yourself so seriously and be funny
Hmm.
intentionally.
Intentionally?
Uh,
Yeah.
I yeah, yeah, maybe unintentionally because people are laughing at you. But no, I'm sure it's been done, but to me, I would think it would be very difficult.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be a very difficult thing to pull off. And I've said it before, because believe it or not, I was kind of a class clown when I was in school. Um, and ever since I was a little kid, people who take
You?
themselves very seriously, yeah, yeah, I know, yeah, it's kind of it's exclusive here. I know you all probably didn't suspect that, but I mean, ever since I was a little kid, the people who took themselves very seriously and could not comprehend my humor, and I'm okay with somebody not thinking I'm funny. What I'm not okay with is when they get to the point where because they don't think it's funny, nobody else can either.
Mm.
And a lot of
Yeah.
times when you get to the camp of people who take themselves so seriously, that's kind of how they see it. So I don't see how they could. I don't see how they could do it. But again, maybe there's a little bit of personal bitterness there because, as I've said before, those types of people have been a thorn in my side pretty much my whole life,
Hmm.
as long as I can remember. Um, so I just have a hard time believing somebody like that could be intentionally humorous.
I mean, I think there's there's a nuance, right? I think that you need to take your craft seriously, but not take yourself so seriously, right? Like
Right.
you
Absolutely.
can you can say, I want to paint something equal to Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel, or that wasn't Michelangelo, was it? You know what I mean.
I think it
I'm
was.
butchering the analogy. I
It
want
was
to
it was
make
one of the Ninja Turtles. It was one of the
Yeah.
Ninja
Yeah.
Turtles that did
yeah,
Totally.
that.
it was a Ninja Turtle. I want to make something as good as the Ninja Turtles comic book, but then also being able to say I probably can't.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
to have the to take your art that seriously, but at the same time be able to turn around and say, I'm only human. I'm not a master. I can I'm doing my best basically. I'm shooting for the moon and I might land in the neighbor's yard and that but at least I tried, right? So and then being able to see that the humor in that, even seeing that you're probably not going to make the next Lord of the Rings, but it's okay to want to try to write it. I think that's the nuance because I really want to write the best book I possibly can. I don't doubt for a minute most writers, at least some part of them deep inside, does.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the same time, I don't want to think that I'm so smart that I'm writing the best book out there, or that this is the only book I could write, or that what I'm going to make is comparable to the classics.
Right.
Because the people who are writing the classics, they weren't sitting there going, I'm going to sit down and write a classic. Like Pilgrim's Progress was scratched into the wall of a prison cell, right? Like they just had the drive and they were making the best they could and they were trying to learn from the other masters. But at the end of the day, it wasn't about being something, it was about doing something. I think if you're it's about doing something rather than being something, then you can look at yourself and realize, yeah, like it's probably not that good.
I think taking yourself, not taking yourself so seriously is important, but taking the art seriously could be important. Like, or rather, is important. Not could be. It is important. Like for my own art, for example, in the next book that I'm writing, which is I'm already working on it. It's coming out in December. Uh, the there's a scene where I believe it's a traveling magician who shows up into this village to do a show, and he gets the chance to talk to some of the kids who happen to be the POV characters, and he talks about how he's the best showman this side of the Nile. And then one of the kids asks, "Well, what's the Nile?" And when I wrote that, I'm largely a pantsing writer, so I had the chapter plot outlined already, and like I knew what I wanted to happen. But this scene, or like this particular moment, snuck up on me, and I wasn't sure what I was gonna do. But it came to me very quickly when they asked what's the Nile. Uh, the guy, without missing a beat, he says it's a river in Egypt, but you're missing my point. And then he goes on to finish his explanation, and so that is to me hilarious. And I think it's one of those small joys in writing is getting to insert those little bits that you weren't expecting to. And I think any art form ultimately should prioritize being entertaining, at least as an art, right? Not necessarily like in what it conveys, but like because it's artful, it should be in my mind entertaining. And that doesn't mean everything will be entertaining to everybody, but we can look at the profound uh, detail and work of Michelangelo's David, who I know actually it was Michelangelo who chiseled it, and we can dive into the detail and see the humanity of David in that marble statue. But we can also take a step back and just say, yeah, that's a sick statue, man. That's really cool. That's entertaining. I like that. Um, and so same thing with, for example, Thomas More's Utopia. Thomas More's Utopia is a philosophy textbook essentially, and it takes itself very seriously. But at the same time, I'm having a blast reading it because I'm a philosophy junkie. And so I think it comes down to two things. One, everything should be entertaining, but two, not everything will be entertaining to everyone. So I think that's something to keep in mind too. Is just because your humor you think is great in your work doesn't mean that someone else will find that humor fun. Some people might find your humor annoying, and they might lessen their rating or like worsen their review because they didn't like your humor and they thought it was annoying and it got weird and just overdone. Whereas somebody else, literally like down the street from that person could say, "Wow, this was the funniest book I've ever read in my life. This is hilarious. I'm gonna recommend it to everyone." It really, you know, if you try to please everybody, you please nobody. So just write a good story and read good stories, as I said in the Discord earlier, because that's
I,
ultimately the
I,
goal.
I think because you made me think about this a bit, but thinking about what Matt was saying is you're going to create what you're wanting to create, right? And so some people don't want to have humor in their books. Like some people aren't setting out to make the next comedy. Some people don't find the comedy in a book like entertaining. And so I think I was thinking about it. I think Matt's right that the people who don't want that, they're not going to be able to do it because it's not something they reach for. Like if they tried to insert humor as a technical exercise, it's not going to have the soul of someone who actually gets the joke, actually likes to laugh. You know what I mean?
That's completely
Yeah, and
fair.
humor it's hard to force humor, in my opinion. It's kind of and that's what I guess why I like it so much. It's just something that has to. Speaking of which,
but humor is forced on you sometimes.
Yeah, there you go. But it's kind of just a natural outflowing. I think that's why I appreciate it so much. Um, and it's all about finding balance because you can, like you were talking about, going too far. And I guess we all have our own definition of what too far is. But it can come to the point where okay, this guy isn't funny. He's just a jackass.
Yeah.
You know, uh, and kind of like what Noah was talking about. About taking the art seriously or taking pride in your work. Like somebody you hiring somebody, paying them a large sum of money to produce the art, the artwork, and all they do is give you back a drawing of it or something. I mean, it's like that's, it might be funny as a joke to talk about, but is that really like if that really happened to you, that's not funny. You're gonna think this guy's just an idiot.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what it is knowing when to do it, when not to do it, and seeing it more as of a natural outflow rather than, oh, I'm gonna force some sort of joke into the story here and make it work. And that's kind of actually, I started writing a little comedy novella, and I dropped it because there was just too much of that. I was just trying to think, like, oh, I got to make this funnier. I got to insert jokes here, and it just didn't flow real well, and it almost pulled me out of the story a little bit when I would go back and read it. I'm like, kind of a weird thing to say, and that situation is just trying to have these little one-liners and jokes being cracked every now and then. So
Hmm.
anyway, that's my take on
I I agree. I find myself in a similar situation with trying to force things when it comes to poetry in my books. I love poetry. I love writing poetry when the inspiration strikes and whatever. And what I'll often find is I will very naturally get to a point in my book when a song or a poem would fit perfectly and quite seamlessly. But then actually having it, like, because now I'm in the mode of like, okay, I have to write this song in order to write the rest of the book. And so I'll kind of workshop something with myself, and I'll look up some poetic forms, and I'll try different things, different styles, different rhymes, and then I'll force something out onto the page, and I'm always second guessing myself and rethinking it and trying to understand, was that actually a good thing. And that's why a couple days ago here in the Discord, which, by the way, little plug here, if you're listening to this and you think you have a cool book that you want to talk about or a cool story idea that you want to talk about, look in the description below for a Google form link where you can sign up to be on this very show. That's actually how I got Matt here to join me for this episode, was he signed up on the Google form link. So do that and get on the show. Anyway, back to what I was talking about.
Snuck
I'm
in.
What's that?
I snuck in.
Oh, well, yes, naturally. But so actually, Matt signed up for a totally different show, which we're still doing next week. But I'm back. I'm like I'm behind schedule a little bit on the shows
And
here. So
ironically, next week's episode is the bookend to this one because it's about grief.
yeah, so
So
humor and then
once
grief.
again,
Yep.
yeah, humor and tragedy going together again.
So I find myself second guessing these poems, and it's almost constant. And that's why a couple days ago here on this very Discord, I sent a screenshot of a poem that I had just written for a scene in my book, because I was like, does this work? Like, like it's got, I think, like, it's got the iambic pentameter, but it doesn't rhyme. It's kind of free verse. And I got a bunch of great feedback. Everyone was like, oh, I thought it flowed really well. I liked it, and all these things. And I'm like, cool. So it's not just all in my head. Like, I actually I can write. And that's something important, dear listeners. If you're writing and you're second guessing yourself a lot, uh, show it to either other artists. Other artists will usually give you really good feedback and really valuable feedback. But especially if you're unsure of something, run it through Grammarly so it's not embarrassingly full of typos, and then show it to a non-artist friend, like somebody like your accountant buddy or something, and get their thoughts on just a cool fight scene you wrote, or a poem that you came up with or something. And oftentimes I have found that they will be blown away by your talent or even just by your effort. um it takes a shockingly small amount of effort to impress someone who isn't putting forth any effort at all in that field. Not that they're being effortless in other things, but like an accountant isn't thinking or putting effort into writing, but he probably still enjoys a good story. He probably still watches movies and television shows and reads a book every now and again, but he himself isn't doing it. And so him seeing you, or he or she seeing you, and getting this cool story from one of their friends who put in the effort, usually they're pretty impressed by that. And that has what's helped me keep my beacon lit oftentimes is the approval of people. And obviously don't do it for the approval, but let the approval fuel you, and let the disapproval fuel you too. Because if you get a lot of negative comments, like if you post a screenshot of your work to X and you get a bunch of know-it-alls in your replies saying this is terrible.
That never happens.
No, of course not. It's never happened at all. I don't know what you're talking about. But if you get people in your comments who say, "Oh, well, this is bad, X, Y, and Z," don't just write them off as haters. Reply and say, "Oh, okay. Well, what can I do to fix it? Like, do you have any suggestions? Like, can I, like, is there a book you can recommend or something that I can read and get better at this particular thing?" And so that applies to a lot of mechanics and a lot of other storytelling aspects. But I do like what they're talking about. Don't force humor. Humor will arrive when it feels like arriving. Don't ham fist it into a scene where it's not needed. Uh, the movie that what was it? Um, so I think it was Ready Player One. Actually, my friend and I were talking about this movie earlier today. There's several scenes where instead of letting drama or great beats of, tragedy or loss or drama in general, instead of letting those things sit with the audience, they jump in, they cut in with like, "Oh, wow, that was whatever," or they do something to take away from it because they felt like it was too heavy, instead of letting it sit there. And so they force comedy into a situation instead of letting tragedy or drama sit with the audience. And that's something that I feel a lot of millennials, my predecessor cohort, uh, struggle with in their writing, or as we see it a lot in current TV shows, which current TV shows, most of them are being written by millennials at this point. Um, and modern books and entertainment media generally, instead of letting the darkness, which we need the darkness to see the light, instead of letting darkness sit with the audience or the reader, we have to just flashbang the audience almost like with an uncomfortable amount of humor or comedy or light into a dark situation, which isn't needed and can be inappropriate and jarring and not helpful. And in fact, it could very much, and usually does, take away from your work. Um, and that's why
Well,
Pantsers reign supreme. Go ahead, Matt.
well, here's the thing. Like I was kind of thinking that the serious and dark stuff that kind of creates the story, then humor gets it going, keeps it going.
Hmm.
Like if you even think, one of the most ridiculous comedies out there. I don't know if you've seen it, Dumb and Dumber, Jim Carrey. One
I've
of
heard
my
about it. Yeah.
historically, yeah, historically probably one of my favorite movies. Ridiculous slapstick comedy. The premise of the story is a woman's husband is kidnapped and held ransom. So very,
Hmm.
very heavy premise.
Yeah.
And then obviously it's a series of bunch of ridiculous things and all that gets the humor out there. But that movie would not have worked if they didn't have that heavy premise that kind of anchored it. And the humor just kind of keeps it going, keeps your attention. But it needed to have that some kind of darkness and heaviness to justify it. Um, Another one, like Tommy Boy is another one of my favorite comedies. I don't know if you've ever seen that. It's an old '90s comedy with Chris Farley. And the premise of that one was very serious. His father died suddenly, and he's forced taking over the family business. So it's again another really heavy premise that just needs to be there, and that goes back again to the comedy and tragedy thing. It's almost like the tragedy makes the humor even more funny. Like in order to be really funny, you need to have that counter opposite to be really strong as well, or else it's just not going to hit as hard. It's just not going to be as funny. You need something. You need a base to build it on, and the serious stuff, the dark stuff, that's your base, and then the humor can build off of that. Big glitch. Okay.
Comedy
There we
comes in
go.
threes, they say.
This is the perfect episode for
It
this to be
is.
a thing, though. I have to say.
Right.
So yeah, hope
So,
Yeah,
that won't happen again.
yeah. So Noah, any more thoughts?
I'm just thinking the kind of in line with, maybe related to what you guys are saying is there's a certain level of risk when you're learning to tell jokes, especially for someone who doesn't feel like they've worked a lot on becoming funny or learning how to be humorous.
Mm-hmm.
Comedy, like professional comedians have put hours and hours and hours into it. And if you're trying to sell a book that's mostly humor, you're somewhat of a professional comedian. So practice. And that means taking risks. You're going to have jokes that won't land. Every comedian that's ever lived, stand up comedian especially, has had what they call a bomb out, where they'll have a full night where they try and try and try and not a single joke lands. And they'll be professional, well paid comedians, and it will happen. And the same's going to happen with you. So get those bomb outs out of your system. Try to find the humor, write the funny things, run it by other people. Feedback is so important with stuff like this to kind of see, you know, is this joke about, killing puppies inappropriate for this scene, or is that too much? That people will, you got to take a little bit of risk and be aware that not everything's going to work. Some things just don't, and that's kind of where my brain was going.
Yeah, I would agree. Taking risks in anything is important because that's how we grow. We grow through pain. They say no pain, no gain because that's a pretty real thing for the most part. Is unless you're going through a struggle of some kind, oftentimes you won't grow. You'll be stationary, and that stationary isn't so bad all the time. It can be safe. It can be comforting, but sometimes also if you want to move on, if you want to push forward in life, you need to make yourself uncomfortable. That includes putting your work out there too, young listeners. If you're a listener and you want to put out a book and aren't sure how, um, come on to X and start talking to different authors, meet people, ask, like, put yourself out there. Be vulnerable. And even if you're a young author, as long as you're old enough to have an X account, I guess, so 16 or whatever. But come on, join us on X and you can at me, you can at any of my friends here in this, or you can go to my page, AB Timothy Author on X, and you can click my following button or even my followers button, and almost anybody in there who claims to be a writer, you can click their profile, post a message, and usually if you're on someone's profile and you click post, it will automatically tag them in the post. Feel free to do that or reply to their posts and get the conversation started. You might find some people in a bad mood of a day, and I can't guarantee everyone will be a great apple all of the time because it's social media. But I've cultivated a pretty solid base of followers and people that I follow who are independent authors for the most part. I follow some people who aren't, but for the most part, they're independent authors. They have time usually throughout the day to check X at least once a day, and are interested and willing, for the most part, to give their 2 cents. And now I'm not saying any of them will be free critique partners or will be willing to edit a chapter for you or nothing like that. But they'll happily talk to you about like, hey, I'm not so sure about this poem or this little like 3 or 4 paragraphs. Can you give me your thoughts? I know one guy in particular, Matt C. Krell, who I follow on X. He's a Protestant monk. He will happily uh, look at almost anything you send him, as long as you tell him that I sent you. If you say, "Hey, it was I heard about this thing on AB Timothy's podcast, and he said you might be willing to help me out on this little short little 3 or 4 paragraph long bit." As long as it's age appropriate, he's a Christian monk, so don't send him anything bad. But like if it's a little adventure or a little scene from a clean romance or something, something wholesome or something adventurous or swashbuckling, put yourself out there. Get onto these sites. Start talking to people. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. Comment on my YouTube channel. Ask me questions. I will answer every question underneath this podcast if it's given to me. Um, and that's a promise. If this one goes viral and I have to answer 1,000 questions, I'll answer 1,000 questions. I will, gosh darn it. But uh, do it. Get yourself out there, because that's what was stopping me for so long. I've been writing for 12 years, and the reason I never got anywhere is because I never put myself out there. I never put my stuff out there into the wild. It never got seen by real readers, by real audiences until recently, because it just I just never got over myself enough to do it. And that's my bit of advice to you, young readers, young listeners, and writers and creatives, is put yourself out there. And that's what I want to have you guys have the chance to kind of close up on. Matt, go ahead and tell me, do you agree with my advice, and what advice would you give those young listeners and writers?
Well, yeah, I'd say absolutely get established in some sort of community where you can bounce ideas off somebody and ask for critiques and whatnot. Like even Noah, me and him have talked before. Trying to get his advice on some things, and I got another mutual. There's another author who is also a very good artist, and I had asked him some stuff as well about cover art or some illustrations. I have little chapter illustrations in my book, and I kind of would ask, hey, what do you think about this? Does this look like? Do these look like humans, or does this look like some kind of alien or something? And got his feedback, but I absolutely ask other writers, feedback, and I would say, you know, try to get to know them a little bit or follow their. Oh, hello.
Hey, Stacy. We're just wrapping up, but that's fine. I'll get your thoughts on this last question, Stacy, here in a minute. But Matt, go ahead and continue.
Okay. But yeah, I would say absolutely. Get a bit, try to get a source that you can feel like you can trust their professional opinion on it, because as we were talking about before, there are a lot of kind of know-it-alls, and there are some people on there that have kind of a superiority complex. So show show some discernment on which ones you feel safe in asking. But yes, please do ask, get feedback and whatnot.
Absolutely. And Noah, how about you? Do you pretty much agree with my feedback or my advice
Yeah,
of
I
putting
think
yourself out there, or and then do you have anything more to add, or?
yeah, I think both you guys have great points. If I were going to give someone advice on doing comedy in writing,
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of the advice of anyone who's pursuing a specific genre or skill. Find the masters of that and study them. Two great places to start is Patrick F. McManus. If you want to learn how to tell jokes in the medium of writing, because it is a lot translates over, but there's certain humor that works really well in writing that doesn't work in other places. Patrick F. McManus is a master of it. The other one I would recommend is Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. If you read those,
Classic.
study the masters at the humor, and learn from them and their style, and then go kind of do your own thing and just take those lessons with you.
Yep.
And one thing I'll add is specifically on humor. I think we already kind of touched on it a little bit, but I think the best humor is earned, and that goes back to the comedy and tragedy thing. And that's why those
I
two
gotta
groups.
sign off actually,
Oh,
so
okay.
I'm gonna take
No
off. But
worries, Noah.
All right, man.
See,
sorry,
catch you,
guys.
Noah. You
Hey,
catch
man.
you later. Have a good
Thanks
one.
for coming.
Um, just so everyone knows who's listening, all of his information will be in the description below. Noah will have his Amazon page, well, not Amazon, sorry, his website serial linked, and his X account. Go follow him, go talk to him if you can, and read his serial. It's pretty solid. So, Stacy, you joined us kind of like on the end here, sort of the tail of the comment, but that's fine. Uh,
Sorry
we
about that. I was
were
eating dinner with my family, and I thought that y'all. I didn't realize that you were doing a show. Even I thought that y'all were just hanging out.
Oh, for sure. No worries. No, so we were just the show was just talking about humor, humor in storytelling, and we kind of already talked about a lot about it. But the last thing I recommended was sort of to my listeners, fellow creatives or writers, is to put themselves out there more. Go on to X. It happened a fourth time. Amazing. So go on to X and talk to fellow creatives, reach out to writers and artists, and reply to their content, follow them, and talk to them. Because a lot of people, especially the smaller ones, pretty much if they have under 50,000 subscribers, I've found, if they have under 50,000 followers on X, they're probably going to reply to you, especially if you're one of the first replies to their post. If you're one of the first 25 replies to a post and you're asking a meaningful question regarding the post, 9 times out of 10, you might get a response, unless it goes super viral and blows up to a million replies right away. But that rarely happens. So reach out, put yourself out there, and communicate and ask for help, but don't just stay there, right? That's where you begin. And eventually the goal is you want to get to a point where you yourself can provide the help. You yourself can get poems from young writers or from your friends and family, and you can start giving them advice and start giving them feedback. But the way you get there is by getting it yourself to begin with. So, because everyone starts somewhere and we have to learn. So that was kind of my advice. And Secret, I mean, if you'd like to just give a little bit more, and or just agree and say, yep, that sounds good, and move on. Whatever you want to do.
Yeah, that's fantastic. No, I think that I always, every time you ask me this question at the end about, advice for other writers, I think I'm kind of like a one-trick pony, and I always say, plug into a writing community, get writing feedback, join a writers group, that you kind of have to be involved in the world more to be able to kind of understand how the world works. And so, yeah, I think that's great advice that you gave.
Cool. Right on. Yeah, well, thank you for joining us, Matt and Secret. I appreciate you stopping by, Secret. I know you had posted that earlier about eating dinner with your family, and that's very important. Listen,
Yeah, sorry
fellow
about that.
authors, if you ever have the opportunity to, one, be on a silly podcast like this, or two, eat dinner with your family, please go have dinner with your family. That's much more important. Do that.
I left my mother-in-law's birthday party for this.
Well, in-laws,
Wish you'd said that before.
that's a special
Yeah,
case. It's
a little
a
more of a gray area. Yeah,
it's a case by case basis with the in-laws. I don't know. Cool.
I was there
So
for 2.5 hours. It's fine.
yeah. All right. Um. So everybody, Matt over there, has a new book coming out called his original book was, I believe, Revo. And now he's coming out with Franco, I believe. The subtitles are really cool, and I don't want to get them wrong, but I feel like isn't Franco the blade of the shooting star?
Franco is the blade of the shattered star. Revo is
Shattered
the blade
star.
of the shooting star. Yeah.
Okay, so Franco, blade of the shattered star, and Revo, blade of the shooting star. Really cool titles. The stories sound very fascinating from what he's talked about on the show previously, and what he's even talked about today. Go give them a read when you can, if you can, and leave a review if you do.
Oh, you can.
Well, yeah, true.
There you go.
And of course, she was kind of a special guest right at the end. But my friend Secret here is also a writer. She's written Bet Donovan and the Battle for Wyoming, which is available right now on Amazon. Her author page will be in the description, and you can go order that. And she's got 2 books which are currently underway. One is another Western style book, I believe, and the other one is a contemporary romance. I believe that's right.
It's a romantic suspense. It's
Romantic
called Life in the
suspense.
Quiet, and it
Yes.
comes out May 22nd. I think that we're book birthdays, right?
We share book birthdays, obviously.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, twins.
so go pre-order her book, and also go pre-order my book, The Shards of Arthur's Shield, which will be coming out May 22nd. The paperback, unfortunately, is not available for pre-order, but if you DM me on X, or if you email me, which you can find my email on my website, if you email me and ask me about it, there is a way that you can order a paperback copy from me directly, and it might even get to your door before May 22nd, so you might have an early copy. Feel free to reach out to me and pre-order that on Amazon if you'd like, via ebook, or buy the paperback when it comes out May 22nd. It's been a blast having you both on, even for the short time we had you on, Secret. And I'm going to close the show. And remember, as you go about your week, keep the beacon lit.